What's up, guys? This video has been in the works for a while. I've been seeing people talking crazy about this topic for quite some time, so it's been building in my mind to make a video about this. Now, first a caveat. Obviously, we will never see these teams play each other, and stats are only half the story. But I believe there's a lot of recency bias in this topic, and it's time to get to the facts and get to the truth. The fact is, there are several massive factors that are consistently left out in this debate, and no, it's not whether Steve Kerr is allowed to coach and play at the same time. These factors are mentality, experience, and basketball IQ. So alright guys, buckle your seatbelts, let's get into it. So the way I'd like to do this is most people think the Warriors 2016-17 team with KD is the best team of all time. But their 2015-2016 team was the best team of all time by regular season record. The Bulls 96 team had the best overall win percentage if you include the playoffs. So I'd like to cover the Bulls season and then compare them to both Warriors teams pre and post KD, and then we'll sort of combine them so we leave no doubt on the truth. Okay, so first let's discuss the personnel for the 2015-2016 Warriors. They were fresh coming off a championship win and were the odds-on favorites again with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson firmly established in the middle of their primes. These are the top minute getters on the Warriors that season, with the highest being Draymond Green, followed by the Splash Brothers, Harrison Barnes, Andre Iguodala, Andrew Bogut, and the unsung hero of that team, Shaun Livingston. Now the first thing that stands out after the dominance of the Splash Brothers that season is the lack of any offensive threat from the center position. However, Andrew Bogut was one of the 4 or 5 best rim protectors in the league that year, and his role will definitely come up later in this video. Steph goes on to average 30.1 points per game and wins unanimous MVP. Now, you can argue which of Draymond Green's years was his best year, but I believe he was at his best this year, and the stats seemingly back this up. He averaged 14, 9, and 7, and he was elite defensively, often guarding the opposing team center only 6'7". He was adept at setting wildly illegal screens for the Splash Brothers. He also really worked on his shot to get almost up to 39% from 3, granted many of which were absolutely wide open from playing alongside Curry. While perhaps a topic for a future video about how I believe Draymond Green is absolutely not a Hall of Famer, this is really my issue with Draymond. He's extremely vocal critiquing other players around the NBA while he himself worked hard that one offseason to fix his shot, and then promptly has not improved a single aspect of his offensive game and has in fact gotten worse in nearly every facet and has had teams helping off him to double his elite teammates for almost a decade now. But like I said, that's another video for when he retires. In this season, he was elite. Now let's look briefly at the Warriors season before we get to the Bulls, and then we'll talk about how these teams match up. Steve Kerr, who will be covered ironically for both of these teams, was just coming into his own Hall of Fame resume as a coach as a defending champion, but he had long been hampered by back problems and finally relented to have a major surgery, and he was out the first 43 games. So the Warriors turned to young up-and-coming assistant and former Laker Luke Walton to be interim coach. Known as a great passer, connector, and assist king on the Lakers when he played with Kobe, Luke helped push an already elite offense to even greater heights, as the Warriors' assist numbers and offensive firepower was unprecedented. Although backed by Klay, Draymond, and Bogut to a 5th-ranked defensive rating that year, their offense was ranked first, backed by questionable screens, great passing, and lights-out shooting. The Warriors had their 29th game with 30 assists by their 55th game, breaking their franchise record. They started off an NBA record 24-0 and were 39-4 by the time Kerr was able to resume head coaching duties. Coincidentally, whether there are those that think that Steve Kerr is a bit overrated as a coach like I do, or those that think he's in the coach GOAT conversation, the fact that the Warriors went 39-4 without him and 33-5 with him is interesting food for thought about how important coaches really are versus the impact of the players. But again, a topic for another video. The Warriors had a 54-game home winning streak dating back to the previous season, and finally lost at home to the Celtics 109-106 to drop to 34-1 for that season. They became the first team to record 1,000 threes in a season when they won their 69th game. They went into the finale needing a win against the Memphis Grizzlies to set the record, and they pulled it off in style, winning 125-104 to achieve the best record in NBA history at 73-9. And Steph, like we said, went on to win unanimous MVP. Now the playoffs are equally important, so we will compare their playoffs in a second, but first let's get to the 95-96 Chicago Bulls. Everyone has heard the story about how when Michael Jordan came back from baseball early in 95, he was working his way back into top shape during the playoffs and got the ball stolen by Nick Anderson, contributing to a 4-2 series loss to Shaq and the Orlando Magic. MJ of course took it personal and went crazy that offseason while also filming Space Jam. In addition, the Bulls brought in Dennis Rodman, one of the greatest rebounding and defensive specialists of all time, after he spectacularly flamed out in San Antonio in a barrage of off-court antics and technical fouls. Many former Bulls players have talked about that being the most intense and locked-in training camp they had ever been a part of, led by the pissed-off Michael Jordan. The Bulls started a ridiculous 41-3, including 37-0 at home. Michael Jordan came back with a vengeance, averaging 30 points a game. Really quick, also a topic for another video, but I always hear in the GOAT debate, LeBron James is a better three-point shooter than Michael Jordan. Well, actually if you watch the games, Michael Jordan talked about how he mostly avoided shooting threes because it took away from his aggressive mindset.
My three-point shooting is something that I don't want to excel at because it takes away from all phases of my game. My game is a fake drive to the hole, penetrate, dish off, dunk, whatever. And when you have that mentality, as I found out in the first game, of making threes, you don't go to the hole as much. You go to the three-point line and you start sitting there waiting for someone to find you. And that's not my mentality.
So in the beginning of his career, the vast majority were late shot clock bailouts or half-court heaves, and he attempted less than one per game. But fun fact, want to know what Michael Jordan shot as a percentage from three the only 5 years that he attempted over 1.9 attempts per game? 39.7%, including shooting 50% this season. But back to the Bulls season. They finished 72-10, setting the record at the time that was later broken by these Warriors. Whereas the Warriors finished as the top-rated offensive team and the fifth-rated defensive team, the Bulls finished as the top-rated defensive and offensive team. So on the regular season, I give the Warriors a slight edge for the record and the Bulls the edge for the overall two-way performance as a team, with the slight tiebreaker having to go to the Warriors because they did set the record. Now we get to the playoffs where everything really counts. As both Michael Jordan and Steph Curry stated during these seasons, the regular season records mean nothing if you don't win the championship.
I think we all want to be on the positive side of history. I think so far we've been that, with 72 wins, all the consecutive winnings, games that we've won. But by no means do we want to do all that and then be the team that lose to the Seattle Supersonics in the finals. And I'm pretty sure that'll be marked in history too. So that's one side of history we certainly don't want to be a part of. And I think that's part of the motivation for a lot of the guys, especially myself, to try to get this thing.
First, the Warriors. Now, Steph Curry did sprain his MCL and missed the second half of their first round series against the Rockets and the first half of their second round series against the Blazers. But Klay Thompson played outstanding and the Warriors cruised to 4-1 wins in both series. However, they ran into Kevin Durant and Russ in the Western Conference Finals, and they struggled against OKC's stifling defense and fast break style with no one matching up well against KD. They famously fell into a 3-1 deficit and looked like they were about to waste their history-making regular season. However, according to most analysts and those of us that watched that series, when OKC started facing some adversity, Russ tried to take over the games and took many ill-advised shots and turnovers. KD and his follower mentality didn't really do much to demand the ball and the momentum turned. The Warriors refound their historic offensive rhythm. Klay Thompson hit 11 three-pointers in Game 6, and they came back to win in 7 and advance to the NBA Finals. This series obviously became the catalyst for KD deciding, instead of sitting down with Russ and working out how they were going to handle these late-game situations, to join the Warriors, but more on that in a minute. In the finals, they faced their by now arch-nemesis, the Cleveland Cavaliers, led by their own trio of all-stars in LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love. The matchup in this series was obviously focused on the ridiculous all-star firepower of these two teams. Curry really struggled by his standards, and although he had a couple of good games, he didn't shoot the ball well and especially struggled in Game 7, going 6 for 19, including 4 for 14 from 3 and 1 for 6 in the fourth quarter. He was also hunted relentlessly in switches by the Cavs to get him on Kyrie Irving, resulting in Kyrie scoring 41 points in Game 5 and hitting the biggest shot of the series on Steph in Game 7. To complete the Cavs' historic 3-1 comeback. Now the most famous question of this series, if Draymond Green doesn't shoot the Warriors in the proverbial and literal nuts, as he always does, do the Warriors win the series? I think they do personally, but the fact remains you have to factor in Draymond's poor emotions into his overall profile as a player. And as he continues to lead the league in ejections and technicals every year, and is tied for first with Bobby Portis and teammates sucker punched in the jaw, this becomes a factor in how the Warriors could have won or lost. It just happened and it is what it is. Now to the Bulls' playoff run. They faced Alonzo Mourning and Tim Hardaway's Miami Heat in the first round, dispatching them in a 3-0 sweep. In the semis, they faced their old nemesis the New York Knicks and Patrick Ewing. The Bulls dropped Game 3 on the road in overtime 102-99, but went on to win the series 4-1. In the Western Conference Finals, the series Michael Jordan had been hoping and waiting for arrived against the Orlando Magic. Nick Anderson famously stated, 45 don't look like 23 after stripping MJ the previous year when MJ briefly had changed his number. The Bulls dominated in a 4-game sweep, with Michael Jordan scoring 45 in the closeout game on the road in Orlando. The Bulls went on to advance to the finals against the West #1 seed, the Seattle Supersonics, to face the Defensive Player of the Year that year in Gary Payton and All-Stars Detlef Schrempf and the Rain Man Shawn Kemp. The Bulls dominated the first 3 games, but the Sonics, who went 64-18 themselves, didn't go down without a fight, responding to win the next 2. But the Bulls put on a defensive clinic in Game 6 to win 87-75 and win the championship, with Jordan winning Finals MVP for the 4th time. So, who gets the edge for the playoffs? Well, the Warriors went 15-9 and finished only as NBA finalists, whereas the Bulls went 15-3 and finished NBA champions. So the Bulls definitely get the edge for the playoffs. Overall record, the Bulls finished with the higher win percentage, going 87-13 with an 870 win percentage. So in 2016, Draymond Green famously called Kevin Durant crying from the parking lot of Oracle, begging him to come to the Warriors after they blew the 3-1 lead, all because he kicked LeBron in the groin. KD, sick of, in his mind, being screwed over by Russell Westbrook's decision-making in the fourth quarters and desperate to win a championship, went and joined the 73-9 Warriors. Now this is the team between the two that, despite winning 6 less games in the regular season, many people feel is the best of all time, and you can certainly see why. And again, while I feel Draymond is in no way, shape, or form a Hall of Famer, he most certainly will be, making the Warriors have 4 Hall of Famers on their team that year. In 2016-17, the Warriors went 67-15, blew through most of the West in the playoffs except for the San Antonio Spurs. Kawhi Leonard, who to me looked like the best two-way player in the world that season, was absolutely dominating the Warriors in that first half. Steph was throwing his mouthpiece, the Warriors were falling apart. Kawhi had 26 points in only 24 minutes and was a plus 21. But Zaza Pachulia was sent in, according to conspiracy theorists, by the Warriors coaching staff to take out Kawhi one way or another, and he ended up going under Kawhi's jump shot, rolling his ankle, and knocking him out of the game and the series. The Spurs were up 25 at this time, and the depression and shock of losing their best player immediately flipped the game, and Curry, smelling blood in the water, of course had a huge second half to lead the comeback. The Warriors ended up with a 2-point win. In my opinion, with Kawhi, the Spurs win that series in 6 or 7, but we will never know. On to the finals, where they of course had the rematch with the Cavs' Big Three of LeBron, Kevin Love, and Kyrie Irving. The Cavs kept a few of the games close and were able to prevent the Warriors from an undefeated postseason, but ultimately Kevin Durant made the difference, dominating the last 2 fourth quarters, famously hitting several dagger threes while guarded by LeBron. He went on to win Finals MVP and finally capture his elusive championship. Now on to our last 2 categories, mentality and how the teams match up. Now if any of you think there's any debate about mentality between these 2 teams, respectfully, you're crazy. But let's just talk about the 3 best players in each team. Let's compare Steph Curry and Michael Jordan. Steph has a solid mentality, but has come up below his standards in several big series, especially this finals, and he has a tendency to celebrate and front run with celebrations when winning and get frustrated and things like throw his mouthpiece when losing. Now with Michael Jordan, most consider to have the strongest mentality in the history of any sport, endless positive thinking, and he refuses to let self-doubt into his head.
Most people live in fear because we project the past into the future. Michael's a mystic. He was never anywhere else. His gift was not that he could jump high, run fast, shoot a basketball.
Yes. Can I walk in peace?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go. I love you guys.
His gift was that. He was completely present. And that was the separator. Michael didn't allow what he couldn't control to get inside his head. He would say, why would I think about missing a shot I haven't taken yet?
Garbage. Open up a nice lead. Put him away, MJ.
So while Steph has a better mentality than some superstars, MJ, being the mentality legend he is, gets the obvious edge. Now to Scottie Pippen versus Klay. Scottie was obviously a mentally tough player in the back half of his Bulls career, and he did a lot of dirty work for the Bulls and was always extremely locked in defensively. However, he did have several moments in various finals where he didn't show up offensively, and famously refused to check back into a playoff game in '94. Klay, to me, has always had the strongest Robin mentality of any player in the modern era. He was humble enough to never be jealous of Curry's success, always has had accountability and strong interviews. He's always been locked in defensively and mostly showed up in big games, especially Game 6s. He gets knocked a little for his disrespectful comments that help motivate LeBron, but overall, I give the slight edge to Klay over Scottie. The last mentality matchup being Draymond versus Rodman. This one's pretty simple, with both players having an off-the-charts mentality in terms of being willing to do the dirty work with rebounding, defense, and illegal screens. But both, of course, are prone to out-of-control plays on the court. While I think Draymond was a better player in the 2016 finals than Rodman was in the '96 finals, I give this matchup a wash with mentality, with Rodman keeping it more together on the court, but Draymond was huge while Curry was struggling in Game 7.
Then this motherfucker then started wearing color contacts during the championship. He started wearing color contacts during the championship with some lip shit on, man. And he would be like he was trying to kiss Frank's arm and this shit, and then Frank just couldn't take it, man. It was just, the man in him just couldn't allow it.
I'd have lost it, too. I'd have lost it, too.
Dennis knew what buttons to push, man, and we needed Frank to rebound and shit, man.
So overall, between the best players, I give the Bulls a slight edge, with Jordan's gap over Curry being bigger than Klay's gap over Scottie. And now to the final criteria, matchups. This is obviously a personal perspective, but hey, I've researched these teams thoroughly and I've thought about it a lot. At point guard, we have Ron Harper versus Steph Curry. Now, most of us expect that Scottie Pippen would have guarded Curry, but just to keep it position for position, a massive edge for the Warriors here. Although shout out Ron Harper, who was a two-way monster for the Cavs and Clippers before blowing out his knee. For shooting guard, we have a great matchup between Klay and MJ. Klay's strength as a defender was all-around intelligence and great body control. He could give MJ a few problems on MJ's elbow work by staying down on his patented pump fakes, but MJ still had a crazy first step at this stage, and he would honestly destroy Klay getting to the paint. MJ was the best help defending shooting guard in the league, regularly near the top in steals, but his on-ball defense was very good but not quite elite. Klay would for sure be able to knock down a few threes on MJ, but ultimately, massive advantage to the Bulls at shooting guard. At small forward, like I said, Scottie would probably be guarding Curry. But here we have Harrison Barnes versus Scottie Pippen. Now, Harrison Barnes at this time was a solid two-way player, basically a very poor man's Kawhi Leonard, but he was only average from three, with his main role being to cut when the Splash Brothers were doubled. Pippen was obviously a great all-around offensive player, shooting the three a bit, a great passer, and a demon on the break, but his real strength was as an elite on-ball and help defender with his ridiculous length and intelligence. Big advantage to the Bulls here. Next is power forward, where we have Draymond Green versus Rodman. Now, quick disclaimer for both the power forward and center positions, both teams ran small lineups at times with these guys playing center. Rodman brought outstanding rebounding, great hustle, and great on-ball defense, but he was also borderline unplayable at times on offense. But he was highly intelligent and he knew how to set screens and pass well enough to still contribute. Draymond was in his prime this year, knocking down the three at almost 38% and brilliantly setting some questionable screens and facilitating when the Splash Brothers were doubled. Despite his soccer impression on LeBron's crotch and calling him the B word, he had a very good finals and was making an outside play for finals MVP with 32 points in Game 7. He is also, of course, one of the best help defenders in the sport and a solid on-ball defender. Slight edge to Draymond here just because of the form he was in that year. Now to center. We have Luke Longley versus Andrew Bogut. Bogut was of course injured for the last 2.5 or so games of the finals, So with the rim protection gone, the Cavs had an assembly line to the rim in the second half of games 5 and 6. He was a great defensive center, but he was not much of a scoring factor for the Warriors, really just there to dunk lobs from Draymond out of Steph double teams. Luke Longley had great touch around the rim, was a great passer, and could shoot the mid-range. However, he was only average defensively and would not have provided much rim protection against the Warriors slashers Iguodala and Barnes. This is probably the closest matchup, so I'll call it a wash. Then we have the bench. The Warriors definitely had the deeper bench, but the Bulls had the biggest offensive threat on either benches with Tony Kukoc. However, after him and Steve Kerr, the Bulls' depth fell off a cliff. The Warriors, on the other hand, had two great contributors of their own in Andre Iguodala, who started at times during this run, and Sean Livingston, who was outstanding during the 2-week stretch Steph missed early in these playoffs. Festus Ezeli and Leandro Barbosa each had a couple good games, and for the reason of depth, I give the slight edge to the Warriors bench. Lastly, coaching. As I mentioned before, Steve Kerr is in the unique position to be judged as a player and a coach in this matchup. He has always been brilliant at navigating the emotions and egos of Steph, Clay, and Draymond, and while his coddling of Draymond and mishandling of young players has hurt the Warriors more recently, at this time the NBA was still catching up to his great ball movement and questionable screen play calls. But he was definitely outcoached by Ty Lue in the finals, specifically on Kerr's inability to get Steph more open looks and to protect him on defense from Kyrie, with Clay later remarking that allowing Steph to switch onto Kyrie in Game 7 still haunts him to this day.
Yeah, man, that was a tough series. Man. That's the other biggest regret I have in my basketball career besides getting busted for the weed was switching that pick and roll with Steph, with JR and Kyrie. I still can't, I can't bring myself to watch that footage. It's too uncomfortable, you know? If you watch yourself, I can't believe I just gave him that switch.
That was a big shot.
Now Kyrie got one of the greatest shots in NBA history, and Steph's a great defender too, but I'm just like, man, I can't believe I conceded that switch. It still burns.
On the other hand, you have Phil Jackson, who in his day was the greatest manager of crazy egos and sports narratives in the NBA. While certainly blessed with 3 top 15 all-time talents in MJ, Kobe, and Shaq, 11 championships as a coach speaks for itself. He was only average in my opinion in coaching offensive X's and O's, with Tex Winter the mind behind the triangle offense. But where Phil excelled was defense, adjustments, and coaching in big games. And this to me is far more important than offensive plays, especially when you have elite players like MJ and Pippen running your offense. Definitive edge to the Bulls in coaching. Now let's talk about the matchups for the Warriors 2017 season, where most people feel the team was massively upgraded by adding a top 3 player in the league in Kevin Durant, despite their record going slightly down. Essentially, the Warriors swapped out Andrew Bogut, Harrison Barnes, and half their bench to afford KD. So now you have 4 Hall of Famers, I would argue 3 for not including Draymond, on the Warriors and 3 on the Bulls. The biggest issue for the Bulls with adding Durant is you might have to shift Pippen off of Steph and put him on KD. Personally, with Robin's solid on-ball defense being somewhat wasted on Draymond, I would probably still have Pippen on Steph and put Robin on Durant. But for the sake of argument, let's quickly go through the matchups for that season. His shooting ability and length will always be unstoppable. KD also was pretty locked in defensively for those Warriors years because he was having less responsibility on offense, so I think he would also give Scottie problems on that end. Scottie wasn't a technically gifted scorer, but he was a great all-around offensive player, and he would get into the paint on KD a few times and make some nice passes and lead out some breaks. Still though, definite advantage to the Warriors here. At power forward, we technically would still have Draymond versus Rodman, although I think Harper would be picking up in the actual series. Like I said with the 2016 Warriors, Draymond definitely took a massive backseat when KD came, but he was still capable of playing at a high level in 2017. But with his fall off and lost confidence in his 3-point shot, Rodman catches up from 2016 Dre, and I give this matchup more of a wash. For center, we swap out Bogut and bring in a random assortment of bigs for the Warriors who often played without a true center with Draymond and KD as their bigs. So really this should be a Iguodala matchup. Because the Warriors were somewhat positionless, and I still hate Zaza for what he did to Kawhi, who by the way, like I said, they were up 25 when he did that. Let's go Iguodala versus Luke Longley just based off of impact. Clear advantage to Iguodala here, who had the NBA Finals of his life in 2015, winning Finals MVP. But he had definitely started to lose his step by this point. But the leadership, all-around two-way play, and somehow seemingly hitting every big corner 3 shot despite not being that great of a shooter, I give it to Iggy. Now lastly to bench, where the Warriors moved on from several of their bench players to afford KD. The Warriors still have slightly more depth than the Bulls with Sean Livingston, Zaza, Ian Clark, JaVale, and David West. Livingston wasn't as big a factor as the previous year, but he still played well, with out of this group only really Ian Clark having a few good games in the playoffs. The Bulls still in my mind had the best player from either bench with Tony Kukoc, but I'll still give the Warriors a slight edge because of their depth. But the two X factors in this series is, while Klay is a good defender, the Warriors have nobody capable of remotely slowing down Michael Jordan. While I feel if Dellavedova gave Curry problems in their series, Scottie Pippen would have definitely given him problems. So for me, that swings the matchup slightly in the Bulls' favor. So in summary, we have regular season, slight edge to the Warriors. Postseason, definitive edge to the Bulls. Mentality, edge to the Bulls. And matchups, slight edge to the Bulls. That's 3-1 for the Bulls, and that leads to my final series prediction, where MJ keeps his no Game 7s and perfect finals record intact, defeating the Warriors 4-2. I did mention at the beginning that we will never truly see these teams play, so we'll never know for sure. But while researching for this video, I come across this legend right here who set up the 96 Bulls versus the 2017 Warriors to face off in a Game 7 of the finals in NBA 2K25. Despite being a fantasy video game with no real life implications whatsoever, people are so invested in this topic that it has over 1 million views. And hell, I clicked on it excitedly myself. If you want to watch it, I'll put it in the description, but I thought I'd show you the last 3 plays because I think it's about how the series would end. MJ gets a huge bucket to put the Bulls up 2 by posting up Klay. Steph then comes down and hits a crazy off-balance 3 to go up by 1 with 1 second left. But of course, you all know how it had to end, with MJ hitting a crazy contested mid-range at the buzzer to win the championship. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've seen some crazy blasphemous takes on this topic, some saying it would be a sweep for either side. I do think the Warriors would really struggle with the Bulls' suffocating defense, but the Bulls would struggle with the Warriors' modern spacing. I tried to bring some objectivity, and we can all appreciate the sheer commitment to excellence and focus it took for both these teams to achieve these seasons in a grueling 82-game schedule and playoffs. If you guys would like, comment, and hype the video, I'd be really grateful. Obviously, with YouTube not consistently sending videos to subscribers in their recommended, please consider becoming a member to support so I can continue to put a lot of time into these videos. Thanks again guys, much love. I leave you with some thoughts from MJ about their season. Peace.
70-9 on the season. The Lakers, of course, had the 69-13. Now Michael goes over and Reds, partner, what does it mean?
Well, I think it's a successful comeback for myself and for the organization. I mean, last year we went through some disappointments at the end of the season, and we vowed to come back and get ourselves back on top. And this is just one step. I must admit, we didn't start the season and say, hey, we're going to win 70 games. We start the season and say we're going to win a championship. We're halfway there right now.
Are you glad it's over now that the 70 is attained?
Yeah, I'm glad. And now we can, focus on the playoffs, which is the most important thing right now.
All right, get in the locker room, take a shower. Great work.
Being, again, the Bulls fan that I was, and with MJ, saw a great quote where somebody said, MJ, if the 72-10 Bulls played the Warriors with KD, who would win? And he said, we would by 2-3 points. Yeah. And they said, why so little? He says, because we're 60.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. And that was a great line, too. I was like, wow. Man.